Hello everyone. Welcome to today's live class. Hey everyone, welcome to today's live class. If you have ever written a Python program, firstly let me explain you on what topic we are going to have our live class. Today's topic is Python functions, which is very important topic in Python, which comes in basic to advanced. Today we'll cover some of the topics using Python functions. So, if you have ever written a Python program, most probably you have repeated the same code again and again to write the same functionality of the Python program. For example, we can see if we have to add something again and again, again we use add. This is the thing we avoid by using functions in our program. And there is literally a better and smarter way to do this. Well, exactly, that's where function come into play. So functions are like mini program inside your programs. They help you break a big problem into smaller manageable parts, which avoids repetition and make your code cleaner, faster and reusable. So think about it like when you go to a restaurant, you will tell the chef every single step to how to cook pasta. You just say one pasta please and the chef follows a recipe. So in Python, a function is like that recipe. You write it once and then you can call it whenever you want, as many times as you want without repeating the steps. So by the end of this class, you'll know what functions are and why they are important, how to create your own functions in Python, how parameter and return value works, and some cool examples. So if you are ready, take your Python skills to the next level and write the code which feels almost magical. So let me tell you some importance of function. So basically, function firstly and bestly it avoids repetition. So imagine you need to calculate the square of number at 10 different places in your code. So by function you can avoid its repetition. And secondly, the code reusability. So once a function is written, it can be used in multiple programs. And thirdly, it has better organizations. So functions break a big problem into smaller parts. This makes programs easy to understand, debug and maintain. And fourthly, collaboration friendly. So in real projects, different team members can work on different functions. Later all functions come together to form complete program. And Fifthly, scalability and efficiency. So, as projects grow, functions make it easier to scale without turning your code into a mess. So, functions make the code more readable for you and for others. So, let's start more to understand more deeply these functions. So, I'll ask some of the questions so you can answer so that we can know functions more better. So, today's first question is, if you have uh, listened what I have explained you now, so you can answer all these questions very nicely. So the first question is, function allows us to reuse code. Function allow us to reuse code instead of writing it again and again. So this is the first question. You can answer in the chat in yes or no. Functions allows us to reuse code instead of writing it again and again. So you can answer in yes or no on the chat. So as I have already told you, functions makes the program shorter and cleaner. So its correct answer is yes. Now moving on to the second question, which is, does every Python function must have parameter? So the second question is, every Python function must have parameters. So you can answer in yes or no in the chats. So as I have already told you, function can also exist without parameters also. So it is not compulsory for every function to have its parameter. So its correct answer will be no. Now as we'll move on to the third question, so the keyword which is used to define a function in Python is def. So if the answer is correct, you can chat yes, or if the answer is no, you can message on the chat no. The keyword used to define a function in Python is def. Is it correct or not? You can answer in the chat. So in Python we define a function using the def keyword only. So this is the correct answer. So the correct answer is yes. We always use def to define a function. Okay, so I got yes from Shivamani, Priya and Ritesh. Good. Now let's move on to the another question. Without calling a function, its code will run or not. So the question is, without calling a function, its code will not run. If it is correct, you can answer yes, and if it is wrong, you can answer no. Without calling a function, its code will not run. If it is correct, you can answer yes, and if it is wrong, you can answer no. So let's understand its answer. So a function only executes when it is called. So its correct answer will be yes. So whenever you'll call a function, then it will run. So now let's move on to the another question. As I have already told you, so the fifth question is, a function can only So the fifth question is, a function can only be used once in a program. So you have to answer in yes or no. A function can only be used once in a program. So those who are answering no in the chat, it is correct. Means function can be called multiple times in a program. Yeah, no is the correct answer. Functions can be called multiple times in a program. So these were very simple and very basic questions related to functions. Now let's start functions. Just we'll see a simple example that how a function is created. So as I have already told you, we create a function using def keyword. So here I am creating a function and here we'll just print a simple message and we'll call the function. So I just want to know what output this will give. You can tell me in the comments, you can tell me in the chats what output does this will give. So here we have created a function def greet. Def is a keyword in Python which is used to define a function, and here we are creating it with greet, and then we are printing a message inside the function body. We tell Python what this function should do. So here in this case, whenever we'll call the greet function, the message will be printed. And here similarly we are calling the function. Without calling it, the code inside the function will not run. As soon as Python sees the greet function, it jumps to the function definition and executes the code. Yes, so those who are giving the answer in the chat as Python coding, it's the correct answer. So as we can see how simply we define a function and call it. And slowly we'll move on to some more examples so we can see how the complexity of function works in Python. So now we'll see functions with parameters. So basically parameters are variables defined inside the function parenthesis. So when we call a function, we provide arguments, means the actual values, and parameters makes function dynamic and reusable. So you can think of a parameter as a placeholder that gets filled when the function is called. So can you just answer a simple question that parameters are written inside the parenthesis after the function name? Can you answer this in yes or no? So parameters are written inside the parenthesis after the function name. You can answer yes or no. So I would repeat once again. Function with parameters. So basically parameters are variables which are defined inside the function's parenthesis. So when we call a function, we provide the argument which is the actual values. So parameters make functions dynamic and reusable. So you can think of parameters as placeholders that gets filled when the function is called. So this was a very simple definition how we relate functions with parameters, and the question I am asking to you is parameters are written inside the parenthesis after the function name. So you can answer in yes or no in the chats. So those who have answered yes, so the answer is correct. Its answer is yes. Because parameters are written inside the parenthesis after the function name only. Okay. So now we'll see a simple example for this functions with parameters also. So let's create a function . So this is the simple example how function with parameters work. So you can answer it in the chat. You can tell me the output in the chat. What output does this will give? So basically what we have done here is we have created a function using the def keyword, and the name of the function is greet, and here the name inside the parenthesis is the parameter, means this is the parameter, a placeholder for the value you give when calling the function. Yes, then we print the message we need to print. So this is the body of the function here, and when the function runs it prints a greeting using the value of name, and here this is the function called. So the argument we pass to the function which replaces the parameter name. So the Python executes the code inside greet function, so it prints the greeting. I have corrected here, so you can now answer its output in the chat. Yes, good. So now let's see its output. So here we can see hello Sam, welcome to the class as the output. So this is how we pass parameters using functions. Now we'll move on to another topic using function is function with return value. So a return value is the result of a function which gives better back after execution. Instead of just printing something, functions can send result that we can use in further calculation. So the return statement ends a function and hands the result back, and functions without a return statement automatically return none. Functions can return numbers, string, list, dictionaries, or even other functions also. So this makes functions more powerful because they can be used in expressions, stored in variables, or even passed to other functions. So now I'll ask you all a question and you have to answer in the chat in yes or no. So a function can return multiple values in Python. You have to answer this. A function can return multiple values in Python. You have to answer in yes or no. A function can return multiple values in Python. Answer in yes or no in the chats. So the correct answer is yes. A function can return multiple values in Python in the form of tuples. Those who are answering yes, it is correct. Now we'll see the example, a code example using function with return values. So those who have answered yes in the chat, it is correct. Now let's move on to the example. Function with return value. So this is a simple add function. So this is the example how we use function with return statement, and I want you to answer its output in the chat. So here in this example we have created a function using def keyword, and this defines a function named add that makes two parameters a and b. Here we are defining two parameters inside the parenthesis a and b. And then here in the return statement, this calculates the sum of a and b, and return sends this value back to where the function was called. And in this line, this calls the function with arguments we have passed, and the function returns the added value which is stored in the variable result. And at lastly what we do is we print the result of the addition. So you can answer its output in the chat. So let's see its output, and those who have answered 30, it is the correct answer. So this is how simply functions with return statement works. Now let's move on to another concept using functions, which is a default parameter. So a default parameter provides a fallback value when no argument is given. So if we don't pass a value, default is used, and if we pass a value, it overrides the default. Means the basic rule is default parameter must come after non-default parameter. This is useful when you want to provide flexibility but still ensure your function works even if the user forgets to pass the arguments. So, I'll ask you all a very simple question related to this default parameter, that default parameters are optional arguments. You have to answer in yes or no. So my question is, default parameters are optional arguments. You have to answer in yes or no. You can answer in the chat. Default parameters are optional arguments. You can answer in yes or no in the chats. So Naresh has answered yes. So the correct answer of this is yes. Default parameters are optional argument. Sure, I can explain the optional arguments. So I have asked you that default parameters are optional argument. So yes, default parameters are optional argument, which is also called default arguments. And these are the function parameters that have a default value. So if a caller doesn't provide a value, Python uses the default, and if a caller does provide a value, the value overrides the default. And optional argument are function parameters that don't have to be provided when calling the functions. And if you don't pass a value, Python either uses a default value if provided or treats it as missing. And if you pass a value, Python uses the value you give. So this is the concept of optional arguments in Python. Now let's move on to its example. So this is the example of how default parameters work in Python. So I want you to answer its output in the chat. Yes, Umaira. I want everyone to answer its output in the chat. Okay. There will be more output. So here we have defined a function called greetUser, and name is an optional parameter with a default value guessed. And greetUser function has no argument is passed, so Python uses the default value guessed. So let's see its output. So as we can see here, the output is hello guest and hello Alice. So those who have answered this in the chat, their answer is definitely correct. So this is how Python with default arguments work. Yes, good. Hello guest and hello Alice is the correct answer. Hi Priya. Your answer is correct, Shivmani. Okay. Now let's move on to another topic related to function is recursion, which is function calling itself. So recursion is a very important part of function. Recursion is when a function calls itself inside its body. So it is useful for problems like factorial, Fibonacci sequence, tree graph transversal. Means it is very useful when you are solving complex problems. So every recursion function has two parts, which is base case, condition to stop recursion, it avoids infinite loop, and recursive case where function calling itself with modified input. So without a base case, recursion causes infinite function calls and a recursion error. And recursion is powerful but can use more memory compared to loop. So as I told you, let me ask you a very simple question related to recursion. So I'm asking you all a simple question, that recursion means a function calling itself. You can answer in yes or no in the chats that recursion means a function calling itself. I already told you, explained you what is recursion, and very simply I told you recursion means a function calling itself. Is it yes or no? So those who have answered yes in the chat, it is absolutely correct. Recursion definitely means calling itself. By the definition only it is very clear. Yes, it's correct. So now let's move on to another example using recursion. Let's try a factorial example. So I'll tell you very simply how recursion works in Python so that you can understand in easy and more efficient way. So here I have written a short and simple example. So you can tell the output of this example in the chat. I'll also explain this now. So this is the example that how recursion works using Python functions. So the factorial function calculates the factorial of a number using recursion, and recursion means the function calls itself repeatedly until it reaches a base case, which stops the recursion. In this function, the base case is n is equals to 0, where the factorial of 0 is defined as 1. So for any other positive number, the function multiplies the number n by the factorial of n minus 1. When we call factorial of 5, Python repeatedly calls the function with decreasing numbers until it reaches 0. So then multiplies all the result together to give a final factorial value. So this is a clean and elegant way to calculate factorial without using loops. Can you tell me its answer in the chat? So let me explain why I have used n is equals to 0. So instead of checking only n is equals to 0, we can also check n is equals to 1 to cover the both cases. This means that if the number is 0 or 1, the function will return 1 and stop further recursive call. It makes a function slightly more general and safe, especially if someone calls factorial 1 directly. Okay? So let's see its output. So the factorial of 5 is 120. So this is how we use recursion with Python functions. Very simple and yet a very powerful and strong topic of Python functions. So if you have any doubt related to Python functions, you can ask in the chat, or also tell me on which topic we can conduct our next live class. So today we have covered the most basic and important topics related to Python functions. And I hope all of you understood how Python functions work using Python, as it is a very powerful and important topic in it. So if you have any doubt related to today's class, you can ask in the chat. Okay, I'll surely tell why. So in factorial function, we need a base case to stop recursion. So factorial is defined. So instead of checking only n is equals to 0, we can also check by n is equals to 0 and n is equals to 1 to cover both cases. This means that if the number is 0 or 1, the function will return 1 and stop further recursive calls. So it makes the function slightly more general and safe, especially if someone calls factorial 1 directly. So we have covered some basic topics like functions are the heart of programming in Python, because okay, I'll surely explain why I used n is equals to 0. So factorial of 0 is defined as 1 in mathematical definition. So this is not something Python's made up. It comes from the mathematics combinations. In maths, the factorial of 0 is 1. You can definitely try keeping 1, n is equals to 1. So I have explained you. Sure, we can cover some more recursion topics and recursion example in the next class. If you want me to conduct another class using Python recursion functions, I'll definitely take one. Yeah. So today we have learned that Python functions write code once and reuse it multiple times. It passes data through parameters to make function flexible. It get result back when return values instead of just printing. It uses default parameters for optional values. In simple terms, function make your program smarter, cleaner and stronger. Always remember one thing: use functions whenever you see repeated code. Give meaningful names to function and keep functions small and focused on one task. So if you loved today's live class, please do like, share and subscribe our channel so that we can conduct more live class like this. And if you want some other topics class, you can comment, you can tell me in the chat so I can conduct more classes like this. But we'll definitely take a recursion class, recursion examples class. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining today's Python function class. I hope you have now a clear understanding of how functions make our code reusable, organized and powerful. Thank you. So keep practicing by writing your own functions daily, even small ones, because practice is the real key to mastery. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Once again, thank you for your time and your energy. I'll definitely update you all for the next class. Okay, thank you once again. अच्छा लगता है लाइव क्लास